Next, what is the impact of artificial price regulations? And two we'll look at are price ceilings and price floors. A price ceiling, think of it as a maximum. You can't go above the ceiling, right? The ceiling sets a maximum price that can be charged. Examples of this is during the gasoline crisis. Many of you were not around for this. In the 1970s, I was. The price went crazy, went very high, and then there was a price cap, which caused long gas lines because there was far more demand than there was supply. And housing in New York City is the same thing because we have a maximum rent control, which causes more demand for housing than there is supply. And the next example is a price floor, and it's the minimum price that can be charged. And in this case, we have an example like agricultural price, which we'll do in a moment to illustrate how that works. So here we see that there's an artificial price, not derived by the market, but by some regulator somewhere, of P with the notation of C for ceiling. So this is a price ceiling. It cannot go above that. So what happens is we have a lot of quantity demanded from the demand curve and a little bit that's offered on the supply curve. So now we have a shortage. And that's exactly what happens when we have shortages. Then we have long lines and rationing because there's more demand than there is supply. So in the case of this shortage, we can actually quantify the lost social welfare because we should have been at an equilibrium, which would have more quantity provided, and we would capture this extra little triangle, which is a social welfare derived from people who are willing to pay more money to get the gasoline that they sought. So the effect of a price ceiling is to artificially constrain the quantity produced and sold, and we have therefore lost social welfare. Next, we do an exercise with the price ceiling. So we're going to go into Excel and replicate this example over there where we have a supply and demand functions here. And we're going to impose a $1.50 price ceiling. And we're going to calculate what is the full economic price and what we call the non-pecuniary price, the non-financial price that is borne. Here you see the same functions. The functions here for quantity demanded and quantity supplied, the price ceiling artificially at $1.50. So let's just set what is the demand, and that equals 10 minus 2 times 1.5. And what is the supply? And that equals 2 plus 2 times $1.50, 5. So now we know the gap is equal to 7 minus 5. So that's the amount of shortage. So first thing we'll do is calculate what is the full price at the amount that was actually sold. The amount that was actually sold was here. This was the amount that cleared because that's what we had. So this is a quantity which is 5, and that equals 10 minus 2 times the full price. So let's solve this algebraically to compute full price. Let's put the like terms on each side. So on the left side, we have 5 minus 10. The right side, we have equals negative 2, and we'll just call it f. Okay. So on the left side, we have negative 5 equals negative 2f. So therefore, we can now solve for f. F equals 5 divided by 2. 5 divided by 2. Okay. And that equals, F equals $2.5. So the full price is $2.5, and the non-pecuniary price equals the difference between 2.5 and the price that was fixed at $1.50. So we have a non-pecuniary price of $1, and then we have the full price of $2.50. Okay, next we'll do a price floor where there's a minimum price. An example might be crops, agricultural crops, where the public policy is that the prices are too low. We have to have the prices set by the government. So here we would set a price that's higher than the equilibrium price. What happens though is at the higher price, there's less demand. There's only this much demand at that price, and yet supply is at this level. So now we have a problem where we're trying to help the farmers, but they're actually selling less product. So there's going to be a purchase by the government for the gap between what is bought by the market, which is this point, versus what is this point here, which is the quantity suppliers want to sell. And that represents a cost to the government equal to this rectangle here, which is a cost of purchasing the excess supply that was not sold to the general marketplace. Here we'll do an exercise for the price floor, and we'll hop into Excel, but same scenario where we have market supply and demand functions, and then now we have a price floor, and we'll see what happens and quantify the amount of government subsidy in order to support this level of crop pricing, let's call it. So here we have the same information provided on the left, and on the right side, we'll do the calculations. So first, let's find where the supply and demand would be at the price floor that was imposed. So let's look at supply. And supply is equal to 2 plus 2 times the price, which is 3.5. So the suppliers would love to sell 9 units. Demand is 10 minus 2 times the price set, which is 3.5, is 3. So the gap is a surplus where we have more supply than demand, and it is equal to 9 minus 3, and that's 6 units. So the government bought all of it. The subsidy would equal 6 units times the price of 3.5. So the government would end up paying $21 or whatever the unit would be in order to support this agricultural policy.